Arise by Tis Snyder. Chapter 16, Paradise Lost. Alex Vossel, Eden Island, 2018. Dinner was citrus-misted lobster with Thai-spiced soy butter, accompanied by puff pastry kebab dumplings stuffed with mixed vegetables and saffron-infused honey. I chose to pair my meal with a large glass of Sauvignon Blanc, delicately holding the stem as the liquid moved gently to my lips. My son, Desmond, had rushed through his meal, choosing instead to focus on the animated movie he'd selected for the evening. My wife and I sat at a table behind him, facing one another rather than the film. She occasionally glanced to the side, smiling at our son's gleeful laughter and unyielding devotion to the screen. And while she watched him, I pivoted my attention from the picturesque moment our family shared in the theater to the life-changing events I had set in motion earlier that day. I had often pondered what my state of mind would be when the time to renew the world finally came. In the weeks and months prior to this day, while I had become outright despised by my colleagues and those I affiliated with, I had also grown secretly both profoundly excited and anxious by their turn of favor. I had become uncannily emotional and reactive, interpreting every subtle component of my daily life to be some great test of my character and ambitions. If someone asked me about a matter of commonplace business, I would grow defensive and short-tempered, fearing my plan had been uncovered and ruined. My imminent removal from the company was an inevitable result of such conduct, and while this decision had been well calculated on my part, the emotions I conveyed and actions I took to achieve that goal were nevertheless genuine. I was constantly afraid of something going wrong at the last minute, of someone discovering my plot and annulling the future I'd planned. Nathan, my former friend and confidant, had grown most suspicious of all. He knew me better than anyone, and perhaps even better than I thought. But even he would not have dreamt of the scope of my life's work. Even he would have considered it madness and beyond the will of a decent man. For while pieces of a puzzle provide clues of what the greater picture may be, those without the courage to consider the truth will never see it. Alas, when I entered the sequence of commands into my clone console, initiating the infection and finalizing my seemingly impossible task, my mind had remained refreshingly clear. There had been no hesitation or foreboding sense of conscience, no hiccup of childish morality or sense of wrongdoing. Instead, my heart had beat with visceral pride and elation. My steps had become lighter, and my mind was exuberant. As always, I kept some degree of distance between my true emotions and the extent to which I let them show, so as not to arouse any degree of suspicion from those living on the island with me. For soon not only would my happiness become inappropriate in the eyes of those I employed and loved, it would become blasphemous. They would, conversely and understandably, suffer through their perceived decay of the world with fear and dread. They would cry and scream, cower and give up. They would exhibit every manner of emotional devastation, empathy, and sorrow without any regard for the new direction of the future. And all the while, I would be charged with secrecy in equal proportion to that which I had carried for years on end. Only now, soon to be a figure of hope and promise for rebuilding a better world, my secret would see me regarded as the true hero I was, a model of strength in a time of need, the leader of the new world order. I had a chance to speak with Gregory while you were in the lab, my wife said, dabbing a spot of butter from the corner of her perfectly painted lips. He said the voyage is going well. Good, I replied, nodding my head favorably at her mention of my annual coast-to-coast yacht sailing event I held for charity. Many of my friends and closest confidants participated every year, and this year especially, I had strongly urged them to take part. Has he been able to keep up with the pack, or did he get lost again? Actually, it's quite funny, she laughed, removing a dumpling from its skewer. He said he hired an entirely new crew this year. Then he had them sail the route in advance under the guise of sightseeing, so no one would suspect how embarrassed he'd been after last year's fiasco, she replied, referring to our good friend's adventure of being temporarily lost at sea. I grinned and shook my head. He should have just plugged in his GPS. You mean he should have just hired someone to plug in his GPS? True. Gregory never was very good at taking care of himself, I exclaimed, as our waiter refilled my glass of wine. I picked up the glass, swirling it gently to aerate the liquid. However, as I did so, I spotted the theater door opening and 3 of my guards stepping quickly towards our table. My wife turned and glared at them, insulted that they had interrupted our evening, expecting me to discipline them accordingly. However, I already knew why they had barged in. I put my wine down and prepared myself to play dumb. I told you not to interrupt us, I stated, turning my chair to face their concerned expressions. One of the guards came to stand beside me while the others branched out to take posts by my wife and son. He leaned down and whispered in my ear. Something's happening, sir. I think you need to see this, he explained, his voice clearly disturbed. What could be so important that you have to interrupt our dinner? This is, he replied, handing me a tablet computer displaying a global news broadcast. I took the tablet from his hands and prepared myself for the first glimpse of the chaos I had set in motion. A camera was mounted on a helicopter circling above a city. Mobs of thousands littered every corner of the screen, engulfing cars and pressing up against buildings. But it wasn't the spectacle of chaos that struck me so much as where it was taking place. The White House gates lay broken on the formerly pristine lawn. Billowing clouds of tear gas flowed over the crowd, but with nowhere to run, even the most desperate of measures was useless against so many people. Even from the air, blood could be seen smeared across the clothes and faces of almost everyone in attendance, soaked in their hair, forming pools in the grass. Immediately around the buildings, gunshots rang out, and a few black-suited figures could be seen unloading their weapons into the crowd. It did little to quell the onslaught. The camera cut away a moment later to a ghostly white news anchor, paralyzed with fear. And as I handed the tablet back to my guard, I did my best to mimic the anchor's expression. My wife looked on with intense concern. I clenched my jaw and turned my attention back to the guard at my side. After I speak to my family, I'll notify everyone on the island that we've entered a state of emergency. No one is to be allowed to dock with or enter the island without my consent. Double the watch on all security stations and have boats circle the perimeter constantly, I explained, immediately utilizing the full force of the security team that I employed on the island. The guard nodded, carefully listening to my every instruction. Make sure everyone is accounted for, and then set up a separate radio channel for them so that they can receive direct updates and report seeing anything bizarre. Also, after I've spoken to them, give them whatever phone privileges they want to try and contact their friends and family, but make it very clear to them that for their safety and ours, they cannot leave the island until we have a better idea of what's happening. Do you understand? I finished, maintaining just the right tone and speed to convince the guard that I was disturbed by what I'd seen. He nodded and turned to leave. One more thing, I exclaimed, taking his arm and turning towards my son. I don't want Desmond to get scared. Get that guard away from him. I'll talk to him in a moment. Alex, what's going on? My wife asked, growing more and more worried with each passing word. The guard left my side and quickly walked away to do my bidding. I drooped my mouth open and shook my head, pretending to be at a loss for words. I don't know. I don't know.